Hey there, Garrett. Thanks for joining us. This is, for those of you who don't know us, this is Brian Keenan with the Bayshore Center at Bivalve, and I'm bringing you another interviews from the Meerwald, where we get to talk to some pretty exciting people out there from the field of science and history and maritime industries. And I'm really excited today to have Garett Eisele from Clark and Eisele Shipwrights to join us. Garett has been a really important player at the Bayshore Center over the last couple of years in our work on the Meerwald and our planned second restoration of the Meerwald. And I feel really lucky that we found him and his partner, Tim, and that they were willing to make many, many trips down to New Jersey to help us with the Meerwald. So with that, I want to introduce Garett Eisele from Clark and Eisele.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, Tim, thanks again for taking the time to join us for interviews from the Meerwald. And as I said, we've had a bunch of different interviews with different people, and you fit right into the long list of people that we were hoping to interview. So, you know, I have a long and extensive background in boat repair and maintenance, and we've talked a lot about my limited experience. So how does the woodworking boat world, the challenges that the Meerwald has as a 92-year-old wooden boat, repairing that boat and maintaining that boat seems like a profession of years gone by, but here you are, a 30-year-old guy who's driving around the country, if not going further, to work on wood boats. How did you get into being a shipwright?
Yeah, that's a long story.
Well, then, before you tell me that long story, what is a shipwright? What is a shipwright?
Yeah, a shipwright is like very, very simply somebody who builds ships. The phrase shipwright isn't actually a dead term. There's still shipwrights. There's still people that build modern vessels. But typically, I think that they're usually categorized more as like marine engineers and boat builders in that sense. But shipwright, in the term that I'm using it, refers to a person who is an expert in using the tools and the materials to build these traditional wooden boats, which were a major part of American and global shipping, and was really a major aspect of the waterfront communities up and down the coast here.
So when we went to metal and fiberglass boats, did the shipwright industry wane then?
Yeah, it did. So in the sense of traditional wooden boats like the AJ Meerwald and what we're talking about here, yeah, that was something that the technologies began to replace, because steel and fiberglass came in and in the 20th century and replaced traditional wooden construction. So the AJ Meerwald kind of fits into, she's 1928, right?
Yes.
And she, that was getting towards the end of when boats were built the way they were built. Currently, we're on one of the newer, in a sense, traditional double sawn wooden boats, which is the construction that Meerwald has. We're working on a vessel called Pauline at the moment, who was built in 1948 up here in Maine, and that was like the very last double sawn boats that were being built in large scale for commercial purposes. So that kind of fiddled out by the middle of the 20th century. So.
But this is still a active business in your neck of the woods in Maine, right?
In a sense, boat building as a broad, wooden boat building as a broad term. So there's the umbrella of making things that float. There's modern boats, and that's most of everything that's happening now. And then there's wooden boats, which are a very small world that I'm a part of. And then there's traditional wooden boats, which is an even smaller world that I'm a part of. And then there's traditional wooden boat restoration and historical replicas, which is this very, very, very tiny little part of this world that I happen to have found myself in.
And where does the Meerwald fall into those categories?
traditional. She's a museum restoration. She's a traditional work boat and a restoration project because she was an original vessel.
So you grew up as a native of Maine, working on boats, and this was a family business handed down to you?
It was not. That's more my business partner Tim Clark's story than mine. I grew up in Michigan, the third generation bricklayer's son, and never knew a darn thing about boats. Although it's unrelated. I mean, in Michigan we have the Great Lakes. There's a lot of water there, and
Sure.
a lot of people are out on the water there, and there's a lot of boats there, and there's a few wooden boats there, but not very many. And my dad liked to take me out on the water, so I got an interest in boats in that sense. But absolutely not. I didn't have any family background in this.
So how does a kid from Michigan, become an expert in wood boats?
It's a long and convoluted story, but I think what actually happened, the reason I got interested in wooden boats was I was watching. Do you remember New Yankee Workshop? It's a public.
Oh,
access.
sure, yeah.
It was. I think it was a Norm Abram, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And he built a melon seed skiff, which is a design out of Howard Chappell's, one of Howard Chappell's, who was a maritime historian, who took the lines off a lot of wooden boats in the early part of the 20th century. And anyway, Norm Abram built this thing, and I was 10 years old, and I thought it was really, really cool. And that's literally why I'm where I'm at right now. And my dad was a pretty cool guy who was pretty supportive of that kind of thing. So I told him I really wanted to build a wooden boat. I kind of got taken with the idea of wooden boats, especially sailing. I think the idea of sailing really caught me. I'd spent a lot of time on Lake Huron fishing, fishing for salmon and lake trout in his 16-foot aluminum boat.
Right.
And I'd watched all the freighters go by when I was little, and I'd watched all the, sailboats go by, and I thought that's really interesting. So that was sort of the way it went. And my dad and I ended up building a little plywood sailboat of our own design in our driveway. And it was a very DIY. Like a lot of people around America do this. They get into boats in a very obvious sort of way. And I just happened to be a little bit of a lunatic about it and took it to the furthest extent that I could,
Well, I like that. I like the story that you never know where inspiration is going to come from.
Yeah.
And I wonder, what happens if you missed that episode? What happens if you weren't home to watch that episode? Who knows where you'd be now? And I particularly like that story because one of our last interviews was with Jenny Shin, and she is a marine biologist over at Haskins Labs next door to us at Rutgers. And she just was always into the outdoors and seine netting, going to the beach and stuff. And she got to go on the Meerwald once, and that really inspired her, into her further interest into doing the work that she does around marine biology. So maybe we could somehow get Norm to come and, autograph one of your boats as a reward to him.
It's funny you mentioned that because the other things, you really do. I really am grateful for lucking out in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of ways that I could have engaged in this trade in a much less, rich and involved way. I guess I could be more of a hobbyist about it. But my grandma ended up taking me to one of the American Sail Training Association's festivals when I think I was 14 or 15. And she took me out sailing on, it was just big ugly steel boat. It didn't matter which boat it was, but to me, it was a big, amazing sailboat. And I asked one of the deckhands, like, how do you do this? How do you get to do this? And she was like, start volunteering. And that's what I did. I started volunteering on schooners. That's
in Detroit?
In Michigan? So,
oh, really?
Not far from Detroit. There's a Port Huron, Michigan, which is about 55 minutes up the river from Detroit. There was a schooner named Highlander Sea, ex-pilot. She used to be the Boston Harbor pilot. And that boat was there for a long time. And I would drive an hour and a half from my little town called Ortonville over on the freeway there. When I was 16 years old, I'd drive over and volunteer. And then the next year they hired me, and that was kind of how I got started.
And how did you end up in Maine and doing this work now?
Oh boy. I ended up leaving home and going sailing and becoming a vagabond for a long time. I ended up sailing on that one boat, and that gave me another job on another boat, and I kind of entered into the lifestyle of the Astus, the quote unquote schooner bum, they call it.
Like the guys and the women on the AJ Meerwald, the guys and
Yeah,
girls in the AJ Meerwald. Okay.
exactly. Yeah, doing exactly what the guys on the AJ Meerwald do, guys and gals. And yeah, so I did that for I'm probably about 7 or 8 boats. I worked up to my captain's license eventually, and I basically would hitchhike between jobs when I was first starting. I think I got a job out west. I hitchhiked all the way out to California and lived out and worked on a vessel named Tollymore. Hitchhiked back around, and I've sailed a boat all the way from Florida up to Duluth, Minnesota, which was really
Oh,
interesting.
wow.
Yeah, yeah, replica of a Great Lakes lumber schooner. That was a really great experience. And it also mixed in there outside of tall ships. I think a lot of my professional skills come from once you get into the maritime industry. A lot of folks who do this, they start thinking, well, geez, I'd like to make a little more money and have some more stability, and they start looking at the commercial sector. So I started working on a couple of commercial vessels as well. So that gave me a lot more hard skills in other aspects that were useful to me in becoming who I am now.
So it sounds like the life of going from boat to boat got a little tiresome, that you wanted to have a place to hang your guitar and your banjo and sleep in the same place at night. And I'd like to talk about that transition, but for kids now today, it's such a different economy than it was just a year ago. And people, everything's just so much different. It's hard to get jobs. It's hard to get good paying jobs. Would you recommend, this lifestyle, this business to, the up and coming generation? It seems to me that there's a niche out there. I know us at the Bayshore Center have a hard time finding qualified people to work on the boat, to be a captain on the boat, to be a shipwright on the boat. Is it a real big bustling industry?
Oh yeah, definitely. And in a sense, I mean, is it is tall ships itself a bustling industry? No, it's quite a small industry. But I think that you can look at if you think of it as becoming a mariner, a professional mariner, that's a really fantastic way to make a living, and a lot of people really love it. If you're somebody who likes like hard skills and problem solving, and also getting to go to a lot of places, I think it's pretty wonderful. It can be really challenging if you don't want to be away from home. It has to be the right kind of thing for you. If you're somebody who needs to be at home and have a stable lifestyle, it can be pretty hard, especially in the early years, because you travel so much. I do know a lot of quote unquote grown up mariners that do have houses and families and to figure out how to make it with their partners and all that. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I guess that's the same for anyone in the industry, right? Whether you're a tugboat captain or you're working on a cargo ship, right? You're going to be. I mean, a lot of, and also airline business, and people travel a lot. I guess
yeah,
less so now with Zoom and things like that, like we're doing.
yeah.
But I never, until I started working at the Bayshore Center, I never really gave thought to, and certainly didn't have any appreciation for the technique and the knowledge and the technical aspects of being a mariner, of working on a boat, certainly captaining a boat, and the repairs on the boat. The engineering knowledge needed behind that, just to be able to plot the maps and physics and sort of all those things. It's a pretty intense career choice.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's the psychological aspect of being at sea. It can be. It depends, if the AJ Meerwald is not going out overnight for long trips offshore or anything like that. But if you do get involved in that part of it, that's really challenging too. But you can always find a way to go home at night, and that's what a lot of folks they'll be young, they'll go out and they'll learn a lot of skills and do hard things and travel the world, and then you can still come home as a mariner too and drive the ferry and come home at night and all that. So.
And you do get to see the world, sort of, not to quote the Navy, right? But you get to see the world, and I mean, the sunsets, the sunrise, the ocean, being out in the ocean, going from port to port. And I guess in my mind, I just imagine these sort of, as you said, sort of vagabonds going from port to port, and never really gave the concept of how uh, how much intellectual knowledge is necessary behind that activity.
Yeah, it's interesting because being a mariner is also one of the last trades that has like a true apprenticeship aspect to it. Because you have to actually allot hours to get licensing. You can't just go to, well, you can just go to school, but they still make you get hours before you can get your license and degree. If you happen to go the route of they call it hawse piping, or coming up through the hawse, when you don't go to school, and
Right.
and you get your license on your own, and you do all your testing on your own and accrue your hours on your own, which is what I happen to have done. But you still have to be there learning from other people, and there's really no other way to learn this stuff, because it's, unless you see it done, it's really challenging to have, it requires a passing down of information, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and for me, I'm a hands-on learner. I'm not a great learner from a book, or so I can appreciate that kind of education.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, like a lot of kids in school like me, I despise high school. I despise school. And I actually barely graduated, and ended up, because I wanted to go sailing so bad at that point. And I don't regret one bit of it. I'm happy that I did. And I also value academia as well, and there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just, I think that a lot of times kids have been told they're like shop classes for kids who are dumb, or for kids who aren't as valued. And I think that if you actually talk to people with respect, and actually hear what they're saying, that you'll find that most skilled laborers are really, really intelligent in their own rights, in their own fashion. Just as I used to work in Antarctica on research vessels, and we had a running joke, because my job as a marine technician was to run the back deck, and actually deploy the science equipment for the scientists and collect the data, because that's not obviously what they know how to do. They don't know how to run a ship. And we always had a joke about how our real job was making sure the scientists didn't lose their fingers, because they're so good. It's like, these people that were extremely, extremely erudite, intelligent people were just very little practical knowledge. And that's just how that,
It's one of the things I like working down at the Bayshore Center with Haskins Labs right next door, because they spend a lot of time working with the oystermen and the ship captains, and the state. And it's an unlikely partnership between these three groups of people who have equal respect for one another, and who understand that the one person, without that one person, the other two parts don't work. And it's just something as simple as getting the sail repaired on the Meerwald, and the technical aspects of not just the sail measurements, but the wind and the weight and the stability of the boat. And it's a lot more physics. And I hope from this there's some kid who's going to watch this and be think that, hey, I'm really struggling in school right now, I really don't like this, but maybe I can be successful doing something else that's not typical. Because that's my worry for a lot of kids, like you were talking about yourself, and for me in school, who think that this book learning is all that's out there and all they can do, and their success is based on that. And there's so much more out there where they could be successful.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah.
So with that, tell us, you get to Maine, and you and your partner, Tim Clark, are working together with and start a shipwright business.
Yeah, how did that get to be?
Yeah,
I guess I was 20, I think, when I moved to Maine. I sailed a schooner named Lynx up here. I was the engineer on Lynx, and I was burned out. I had worked on 7 different boats. I'd been across the country a million times. I'd really done a lot of things and hadn't stopped at all. And I realized I needed to stop and kind of find some more stability in home life. So I ended up moving into my friend's barn in Lemoyne, Maine, which is up near Acadia National Park. And I lived in his barn, and we lived off of peanut butters and cheap wine for a while. And and
What a
really,
life.
really, yeah, really, I washed dishes for a bit and just kept kind of poking around boatyards. And something that caught my when I was 16 and I started working on Highlander Sea, my first boat. Highlander Sea was built in 1924. She's 156 foot wooden Grand Bank style fishing schooner style construction. She was actually a pilot boat, but she was built in the style of that type of boat. And that's like the most real deal big, hardcore wooden boat that you can have. It's one of the biggest most powerful schooners in the country. She's an oyster bar now, unfortunately. But yeah, but I got to meet the shipwright that rebuilt her in between 2000 and 2002, I think, Andros Kyprigoris. And I just remember it didn't occur to me. I was on the boat and I thought, whoa, people built this. I mean, this exists still. It's not just going on without repair. Somebody knows how to actually do this. My coworkers don't. The crew didn't know how to actually, like, how do you walk up and put a chainsaw in the side of this and know what you're doing? And that to me was the coolest thing in the world. And I didn't really forget that. So I started, as I sailed, I kind of got interested in like picking up side work and like finding ways to, like, when we were in the boatyard, like really making myself available to help out the shipwright. And try to, like, I'll dust the floor, I'll sweep the floor, I'll do whatever you need, I'll do the dirty work, just let me work with you. So I was really, really willing to do that for a long time. So when I got to Maine, I was kind of had that in mind, because Maine really is, it was and remains one of the, it was the epicenter of boat building in the United States in a lot of ways. There's a couple of epicenters, and actually down where you're at, in the Chesapeake and the Delaware is another epicenter. But today, if you want to go learn how to be a boat builder, Maine or Washington are the place to go. And so I was looking around for that, and I ended up getting hired at North End Shipyard as the watchman, which the night watchman, which meant basically that I had to do whatever the owners wanted me to do for 20 hours a week, and then sleep there and make sure nobody was, doing anything silly with the property. And I just slowly kind of started crawling my way through projects that way, and getting hired here and there. And it's hard because there's no school for it. You don't get trained. You end up just having to find people that are willing to teach you, and hope that they like you and think you're a good worker. And so that's kind of how it started going. And I think really the big break for me was I got hired at Rockport Marine, which is a yacht yard, and it's adjacent, but it's a totally different scene. It's not the same thing really at all. They're building, Rockport Marine is one of the most renowned wooden boat builders in the world, really. They've done some of the most high end and perfect restorations of very, very, very fancy yachts, that are, kind of not like the AJ Meerwald is for normal people, and like
It's a work boat.
These boats were not, but if you go there, it's a chance to learn an incredible amount of skills, because the best boat builders in the world work there.
Right. And
so that's where I met Tim Clark, and we ended up. My job there was I worked on the yard crew. I was a rigger. Every spring we had to put all the masts in the boat, launch all the boats for all the clients, put all the masts in, put all the sails on. And I was like, hey, I'm a sailor and like a quasi rigger. I can do that job. And so that happened. But in the wintertime, there's no boats to rig. So they let me go inside. And they're like, how do we keep this kid employed, And
I'm like a dog. We left him inside.
Oh my God, they gave me amazing jobs. But they basically, they gave me a bunch of crummy jobs, but they also kind of let me run loose, which was really cool. And I found Tim to be the most patient and inviting and kind person I'd ever met. And I just really thought that he was a great teacher, and he was so happy to teach me because I was so interested. Like a lot of people who do this kind of thing, like all we really want to do is show other people what we're thinking about when we're doing it.
Sort of like gardeners. The best thing, gardener wants to teach another person how to garden.
Yeah, and then they end up talking about the lilacs all spring, and you can't stop. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so at risk of being annoying about it, but if you find somebody who wants to hear that stuff, it's really fun. So Tim and I really took to each other, and he taught me how to hang my first plank when I was like 20, 21 years old. And I got the nickname Chucklehead in that boatyard because I would laugh so loud under the boat, and then they'd just hear me yelling, laughing with him basically. It sounds corny, but it's real. Like I really appreciate meeting him. So we became really, really great friends and started daydreaming about this stuff. But it was quite some time. It was another 6, 7 years before we started actually going into business together. So that's an whole nother story if you wanted to hear it.
So it's an important part of our story because we have a project that we're going to be working on together, which is going to be the second part of our conversation here with Garett, which is sort of that business. Clark and Eisele is how I know you and how you came to the Bayshore Center to work on the AJ Meerwald. So I'm gonna keep you to that promise of telling us about the work on the Meerwald in our second part of this interview. And for those of you who don't know, the AJ Meerwald, which is New Jersey's, the state's official tall ship, is a 92-year-old Delaware Bay oyster schooner. She is a historic boat, quite beautiful. Garett and his partner Tim have been working on it for a few years. And with the support of the state of New Jersey, Historic Commission will be going to Maine this September for a 6 to 9 months, hopefully closer to 6, but maybe 9-month restoration, her second restoration in 30 years. So she's been working hard for 30 years and she needs a facelift. And part 2 of our conversation with Garett is going to be a little insight into that restoration, what we can expect, and hopefully during that 9-month period, Garett, you will continue to talk to us and maybe take the Zoom camera with you and show us some of your work.
Okay.
So, all right. So thank you, Garett, for joining us. And for those of you who want more information about the Bayshore Center, you could look at bayshorecenter.org. And if you're interested in shipwright work, I will make sure, or shipwrights, or anything about Clark and Eisele, I will make sure that Garett's information is included above in the overview of this interview. So thank you, Garett, and we will be talking soon.
Sounds good.
All right, great. Thanks again.
See you, Brian.
All right, take care.